Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the I'm No Expert podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Peterson. Today we have a very special guest with us, Miss Brandy Snyder. Miss Brandy Snyder has just recently been named the secondary principal here at Immanuel Christian School. Many of you listening know her. You've had her as a biology teacher. You've had her as an anatomy, physiology, or marine biology teacher. So she is no stranger to Immanuel Christian School. But Miss Snyder, thank you for taking the time to sit down and just have this interview.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's a great honor.
well.
And like you, I'm no expert, so this will be fun.
This is gonna be very, very interesting. But no, Miss Snyder, my goodness, Miss Snyder has taught here for quite some time. Miss Snyder was my biology teacher. Yeah. Back in, what was that? That would have been 2014-15 school year. You're my biology teacher. I passed. I'm not going to say I got an A, but I passed.
Yeah, hey, that's what counts, right? That's
all that matters. Especially once you get to college, that
right.
that C's get degrees really starts to set in for you.
Yeah.
And then you took a break. You took a break from ICS, actually right after my freshman year. So we're going to get into all that. But Miss Snyder, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself and just feel free to share as much as you want. And then I got a few questions for you.
Right. Well, when I'm done sharing, feel free to cut out whatever you want.
Yeah, that's going to be the editing process. I'll get all the bleeps in, and I'll get everything else.
Yep. Yeah, you give a Snyder an open mic, we'll sit here all day and talk.
If you're anything like your brother, yes, I believe that. I believe that.
All right. Well, I was born at a very young age. My father was in the Marine Corps, and he was stationed at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. And so that's where I was born, lived in North Carolina only for about a year after my birth. And then my parents moved back to Utah, which is where my mom and most of her family was raised and born. And my dad had some family that lived in Utah as well. So I spent the majority of my life, childhood, teenage years, and my early adult years in the state of Utah, which was an interesting experience because typically when you think of the state of Utah, one of the things that probably comes to mind is Mormonism.
You're not going to end up. You're not going to end up in Christian education. That's
right.
not what we're expecting.
Yeah, exactly.
When you spend most of your life, or a good chunk of your life, in Utah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we weren't technically Mormons, but by default, because we didn't really claim a religion and we lived in Utah, we were considered Mormon. And so, if you would have asked me what religion I was in my younger years, I probably would have said I'm Mormon.
Wow.
So, yeah, kind of interesting, fun fact there.
But
so,
no actual
right.
devotion to the teachings of the church.
Yeah, I think, in fact, no devotion to the teaching. And I do remember on a few occasions being sent to the Mormon steakhouse, which is kind of like their church. And
you said Mormon steakhouse?
Yeah, not like where you sit down and
that
eat a
is
steak.
not what I was like.
Right, yeah. That's what most people think. Wow, you get a steak dinner when you go listen to their teaching. No, you don't.
I'd think about it. I'd consider it for a good steak.
They need to change the name. They need to really change the name. Yeah, so it's just a meeting place. And I think we were sent there because my mom wanted some free time. We were not the best children, me and my older sister.
It was more like a daycare than anything
exactly.
else. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't see it as that, but she got a break from us, so she sent us there. But anyway, when I was about 10 or 11, we had some individuals come to our door, and they asked if me and my older sister wanted to attend Vacation Bible School. And I heard the word school, and I was like, I'm out. I don't like school. I hated school. Especially
not over summer break. You're not going to give up part of your vacation to go to school.
That's right. What mad person would do that? So I declined. My sister went. She came back. She had balloons and cookies, and she had built this cool craft, and she was telling about all the games she played and how much fun she had. And I thought, I think I might be able to handle that kind of school. So I went with her the next day and through the rest of the week. It was there that I was introduced to Christ. I heard him not used as an explicitive, and instead was shared with how much Jesus really loves me. And that blew my mind as a 10, 11-year-old to think that there was someone out there that loved me at that depth. And so through that Vacation Bible School, I gave myself over to Christ and been trying to live for him ever since. It's not an easy life to live, but it is a very rewarding life to live. So fast forward up through my years of education, I ended up in Kansas City at a Christian college there, graduated with a degree in secondary ed, and ended up shooting out resumes to a handful of different schools, seeing what positions they might need filled that were in the realm of science and varsity volleyball. And so this school was obviously one of those on that list, and there were a couple of others that showed interest, but ultimately God swung all the doors open for Immanuel Christian, and that's how I ended up here. So,
there you go.
yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back for a second. So how long after you were saved did you continue living in Utah?
I believe that was about 10 or 11 years.
10 or 11 years after you were saved.
Correct.
So well into your 20s and that sort of thing.
Yeah, my early 20s, my father was called to pastor a church in Topeka, Kansas.
Okay.
And so at the church where we were attending in Utah, I was the youth leader. And so not really praying much about it, just kind of on auto thinking. My family is leaving to minister at a church in Topeka. I'm a youth leader. That makes sense that I would go with them and be the youth leader there.
It's just natural.
So
that you would
yeah,
go.
yeah.
How was it living in Utah as a believer at this point? So you'd gone from I guess being culturally a Mormon, I guess just based off of geography.
Yeah.
To now you're something completely different. You're a believer in Jesus Christ. So what was that like?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because the Mormons, they are externally very moral people, but inside they remind me of what Jesus talks about in the Gospels about whitewashed sepulchers. They look good on the outside, but inside they're dead, they're rotting, and that's basically the picture of really any religion that teaches you that you've got a part in your salvation through your works and through your efforts. But the reality of it was my parents had some really close friends that they'd known for multiple years through their time in Utah, and their friends had kids that me and my sister were friends with. But when Christ entered into our lives, that friendship just shattered, and it was clearly I'm going to try to one-up you with my religion because you're saying that the Bible's right and that I'm wrong, and so I'm going to show you how much better of a person I can be than you. And so that's kind of what that relationship turned into, and it was just this massive wedge that pushed our families apart. So there was a little bit of, I don't really know if I would label it persecution, but something similar to that. But,
definitely a degree of like divisiveness and rejection, I guess.
Exactly,
almost
right.
Yeah.
Like
just kind of being ostracized. For sure.
Yep, that's a great way to put it. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's definitely why I wanted to ask the question because I just kind of wanted to draw that contrast, and I think whitewashed tombs is a good way to describe it. Very morally upright on the outside, but as any religion that separates itself from Jesus Christ, it's going to become very divisive, I think, and go off the wrong wrong track.
Because that everything's about me. It's now you're attacking me because you're saying I can't be good enough to earn God's favor. Right. Well, newsflash, that's God who says that. I'm just repeating what He has to say in His Word. Yeah. But on the flip side of that, just so the image there isn't like, oh, poor Snyder, it's God had definitely put some really solid people who knew God's word into our lives, and where that void became, it was almost instantly filled with these other
good,
believers
people,
who just absorbed us and loved us and helped us along that path to becoming more and more like Christ as we lived out our lives there in Utah.
Wow. That's awesome. And then so you move on from Utah, move on to Topeka, Kansas, spend some time there for a bit. And then you, like you're saying, you attend university, and you start looking at jobs, kind of throwing your resume out there, and you land at Immanuel Christian School.
Yeah.
You mentioned volleyball, and that's something I failed to mention because you were the volleyball coach I mean,
Yeah.
you were the
way back
volleyball coach when
started.
I was like in 3rd grade, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yep.
So I totally failed to mention volleyball, but you spent some time coaching volleyball. So where did that come from? How did you get into volleyball? What made you want to be a coach? And share about that aspect of your time here at Immanuel Christian, the volleyball side. Then we'll get into the teaching and ministry side.
Yeah, I played. I want to put quotes around played in high school because when my family became Christians, we were pulled out of the public school system and we were put into a very small Christian school. Like the totality of the people that went to that school was probably about 15 to 18 students.
Wow.
So we were all in the same room together, learning at our different levels. And basically it was kind of a self-taught program through these booklets.
Yeah.
And so the individual who was the principal was like, hey, we got enough girls to put a volleyball team together. Do you want to play? And we're like, sure. So you know how many girls he thought he had enough of? There were 4 of us. And so he taught us how to play volleyball with 4 girls.
4 players.
Yeah, we didn't play positionally. We just kept the ball off the floor, tried not to carry it, sent it back over the net in the number of hits allowed, or allowed. And we just had a good time with it. So when I went to visit the college where I was going to go in Kansas City,
right,
the AD sees me. You know, I'm 6'1", and she sees in my application that I played volleyball, but I didn't put any quotes around it there, you know, so she's probably got a different image in her mind than what I came from. But I do believe that God's blessed me with some athletic ability and some talent in that realm. And so she asked me just to walk on, and I did. And she's like, hey, I could use you. So there I was playing volleyball in college, which was a lot of fun. You know, it was different. I had to really actually learn how to play volleyball.
Yes, you learned the game of volleyball.
Yeah, and I learned it well. I had a really great coach and great, not just on the court, but in life. You know, when you get those rare coaches that really want to pour into you as an individual and not just as a player, and see you succeed beyond the volleyball court and beyond your graduation from their institution. That's the kind of coach I had. And so it was because of her that I really found joy in that particular sport. So it just seemed like an easy segue to me when I graduated from college with my degree in teaching to also include coaching volleyball in that realm.
Something that you'd be interested
in. Yeah. And besides, I kind of looked at it like an outlet also. You know, like I didn't want to just be stuck in the classroom all the time. I wanted to have these other avenues into my students' lives that I could minister to them through, and that seemed like a perfect fit for me. And so when I was seeking that school where God wanted me to go, that was one of the things I was hunting for. And you know, I was willing to go wherever God wanted me to go, and the door just opened to come here in El Paso. So
you had 2 things. So you had no connection to El Paso, Texas before.
None.
It was just purely they offered me a job.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, no family, no friends down here.
And then slowly but surely, a good chunk of your family ends up being here. And so
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To that point, and to make it about me for a second, I was able to be, I played under your brother for a little bit. He wasn't able to keep me as a player. But you were a bang-up manager. I was a fantastic manager.
You were, yeah.
And by the time I got to my junior year, my title wasn't even manager. I was assistant to the head coach.
There you go. You just leveled up through that whole
finally
organization.
Graduated. Well, it ends. I think it ends up being the reason why I'm still here in some capacity today. You know, but I know your brother had the same mindset. He, Dan Snyder, he wanted to pour into his athletes and stuff like that. I mean, he was a tough coach.
Yeah.
He was a tough coach. And
runs in the family.
And I can say it now because he doesn't work here anymore. There were many clipboards broken. There were many markers thrown. Pretty sure I had a water bottle thrown at me one time. I might cut that part out. I don't know. I'm not
That was a
sure.
slip. He was trying to set it down
and it just
slipped out of his hand. Yeah.
But he was definitely one of those people that wanted to pour into his students, off the court and just find, like you said, different avenues into their lives so that they can have that mentor. And that's why it was so awesome to go from knowing Dan as a coach to, Dan no longer lives here. He lives in North Carolina with his wife and his family. But, that turned into us going shooting on the weekends. And we even went camping once. And, it's that sort of thing that one of those times where that mentor becomes a friend in your life and someone who you really looked up to. And so I know Dan was that guy for me. And so that obviously runs in the family as something. And you always have students coming back and saying, what's up?
It's great. I love to see returning students. That's like the highlight through the year, is to have students pop in. Hey, I'm on break. Just want to come say hi. Yeah. That's so rewarding as a teacher, to be able to have your students come back and give some of their time just to say, hey, I wanted to just stop by and say hi. Some of them, they'll thank me. Hey, thanks for being a tough teacher.
I was about to say,
because you helped me out through college.
Yeah. You're not an easy teacher.
Yeah,
like not just grade wise and like workload wise. Like you're the dress code teacher around here. Like you do the things, I hold you
to a certain standard, right?
Exactly. You do the hard work around here. And in spite of all that, you have students that really come back and just appreciate what you've done.
People begin to understand the value of living out a life that's lived in excellence, and an excellence in all levels of life, not just academically, but to be able to go through life saying, what can I do to be the best person at what I'm doing in every realm? How does my appearance matter? How does my speech matter? It's not just about academics at our school. It's about life. And academics definitely is one of those focal points of our school. But the true goal is to have a student leave our school that's well-rounded and prepared for life. And so that's the goal. So sometimes, I get students that we butt heads and we clash, and we get through the school year together. And I love all my students, the hard ones, the easy ones, and the in-betweens. And it's just a joy for me to see them come back. I think it's a real testament to their character. And it's such an encouraging thing from the perspective of a teacher. So, yeah.
So now talking about your first few years here at Immanuel, I already broke the news. You're going to be the secondary principal, effective in January, right? 1st of January.
Yeah. That's when I get the title. But I'll tell you right now, I've already got the work.
You already have the workload. Well, and then
they pulled that trigger prematurely.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be doing something pretty rare to you. You're going to still be teaching marine bio and anatomy.
Just anatomy.
Just anatomy?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the rest of this year?
Yes.
So I'm getting ahead of myself. You're going to be the secondary principal. When you came to Immanuel in, do you remember the year?
05.
05.
Yeah. Long time ago.
I was a kindergartner. Oh my gosh. Okay. So when you came to Immanuel, and I'm sorry.
I know. Yeah. I like how you just indirectly called me old. That's okay.
That wasn't
I'm
the
coming
goal.
To that realization.
But when you came to Immanuel in 05, what was the plan? Like, you came by yourself, no other family. Yep. Like I said, your brother eventually joined you. Your parents would come down at some point. Your mom's actually still very active here in the building. She would sub for a lot of my high school years, and then we still see her around the building.
Yeah.
But what was the plan in 05? Like did you think you would get to this point?
I did, actually. That was actually part of the plan. When I got ready to graduate from college, one of my profs, he said, it's so important in life as you get ready to close out one chapter of life that you're really looking to the next chapter in your life. And it's important to be able to set goals for yourself as you move through life. So I would encourage you to set, 3-year goals, 5-year goals, 10-year goals, and maybe even shoot for something way out there in the 20-year range. And so I thought, there's a lot of wisdom in that. I'd like to go a certain direction in my life. I understand that there are going to be some other things that contribute to that and play into those plans that I have. And that, I lay those plans out, but God is the one who's going to direct me down the path he wants me to go. But I've always had a desire to move up into administration. So a couple of my lower goals, if you let me call them that, they're not really lower, but they're just lower than getting to administration, were to be able to take a volleyball team to a state championship game while I coached. And I can check that box off. I wanted to be the best teacher in Immanuel Christian School. I don't know if I achieved that, but I think I can honestly say that I'm one of the best.
Yeah. No slight to any other teachers, but I think you'd have a handful of students that would probably say that. So there you go.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be able to do things in such a way that God's getting the greatest glory from how and what I'm doing. And I felt like not only was I gifted in the realm of teaching, but I'm gifted in the realm of administration as well. And so, in fact, in 2009, I pursued my first master's, and that master's degree was specific for administration at a Christian school. Yeah. So... yeah, so it's on the it's been on the radar for a while.
Long story short, that was
That's
the
right.
goal, was to make your way to administration. Okay, so talk to me a little bit then about kind of like that 14-15 year. You decided to actually take a break from teaching, join ministry full time. As much as you're willing to share, kind of what was your thought process behind that? Because I think someone on the outside looking in would say, well, that's not the route you go if you're going to go to administration.
Right.
You don't leave the school that you would like to be an administrator at and step away. So I don't know, what was your mindset about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love being asked that question about those couple of years in that time period of my life, because I think it allows me to kind of lay myself out with some vulnerability in the answer. And I was really going through some times in my life where I just felt impressed by God to be on the mission field. And I just didn't think that I could do that being in the classroom. And so after some prayer and some considerations that I made, I really did feel like God was giving me the green light to exit Immanuel and to pursue some other leads to be able to go out and impact the community for the gospel. And so, talking with the leadership at my church, I attend Horizon Christian Fellowship just here a few blocks to the north of our school. And they thought that was great. And in those conversations through multiple months, they ended up saying, hey, we kind of have this vision for starting a ministry that reaches out to nonprofit organizations and connects, particularly our target group would be believers, to be able to go out and minister and serve at those NPOs. And we're wondering if you would be willing to start that particular ministry for us. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, because I had no idea where God was going to lead. And so I thought, you know what, let me pray about that. I'm pretty sure that this is the direction God's going to have me go, that he has, tagged me with this. And so after a few days of praying through it, I went back to my leadership and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to say yes to that. It seems like something that feels like this is what the direction God's leading me. Well, to make a really long story a little bit shorter, through the course of those couple of years, I really grew in Christ, I think, through those years, being able to talk to people about helping other people. And one of the things that was really impressed in my mind through that particular process was this idea from Scripture that you're not a missionary because of your location. You're a missionary because of what you're doing at your location. And that really resonated in my mind and my heart. And around that same time, my church leadership came back to me and they said, hey, we've been the big main contributors to your budget for these last couple of years with your organization, but we're going to ask you to shut it down because we want to go a different direction and place that money elsewhere. And at first I was like, wow, okay, kind of taken aback a little bit, but I can really, in hindsight, look back and see that this was part of that learning process that God oftentimes brings into your life, and he teaches you these lessons in a very unexpected way. And it was like the Holy Spirit was trying to tell me, look, you've been in a mission field. Every year I send you a whole new group of people to minister to. And you've got this opportunity in that classroom every year to minister to these people. What are you doing with that opportunity? Are you taking the time to be able to be that missionary that you feel I've drawn you to be. And I really honestly had to sit there and say, I guess I haven't been that missionary. So what makes me think I would be that person if I went to a foreign country, if I'm not having this mindset and this intentionality of doing it right here where God already has me. And so, you know, it was a moment, I would say, of repentance for me and of recognition that God had already put me in a place to be that missionary that I thought he was drawing me to be. And he built in me this desire to want to interact with these young people through the modality of being able to teach. And so there I was, already set up to do exactly what I was asking him to send me to do. And it was just kind of like one of those moments where he's like, okay, you got it now? I've already sent you there. Yeah. So go back and let's get busy doing it.
Yeah, you had the mission field coming to you.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
And you didn't even know it for years.
Yep.
It took you kind of going off, you know, and trying something new and trying to step out of the mission field, and then God slowly but surely called you back and was like, let's try this one more time.
Exactly.
Let's go again. So
fresh eyes, new perspective, you know, and that's the way our God works. I think that he does things for us that are completely unexpected.
Right.
And it makes us better. It molds us, it stretches us, it challenges us. What am I seeking after God for? How is it that I want to live a life that's pleasing and honoring to him? So when I get to the end of it and that veil is dropped and I'm staring at him, am I going to hear those words, you know, well done, good and faithful servant? Or am I going to hear something else? And my heart's desire is that I hear those words, hey, I gave you this, you were faithful with that, so well done.
Amen to that. Right now we're sitting down with Ms. Brandy Snyder, the new secondary principal of Immanuel Christian School. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. You know, as the host of the I'm No Expert podcast, I need to say how thankful and grateful I am to all of you who have decided to take the time to listen. I especially want to thank those who have decided to follow the podcast on Spotify and subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for also leaving reviews and comments. Those are very helpful. That helps me know whether or not I'm providing a quality product. Some of you may not know that we are on all major social media platforms. You can find us on X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at No Expert Pod. Please like, comment, DM ideas that you may have, but when you have an idea or a topic or a question that you want us to look into, your best way of getting a hold of us is through our email address. That's noexpertpod@immanuelwarriors.org. That's noexpertpod@IMMANUEL warriors.org. And let me just say, we're really excited about the slate of guests that we have coming up. But the thing is, there's only so many guests out there. So when you provide us with questions, topics, things that you want to hear, things that you want to learn about, that helps me better choose what expert I need to get on the show to answer those topics. So again, find us on all major social media platforms. I gave you our email address. Feel free to reach out to us there. And once again, thank you for being a listener, a follower, subscriber. Be sure to leave a comment and a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even on YouTube. And hope you enjoy the rest of this show. Welcome back, everybody. Again, my name is Aaron Peterson. You're listening to another episode of the I'm No Expert podcast, today with Miss Brandy Snyder, the new secondary principal of Immanuel Christian School. Miss Snyder, thank you once again for joining us today. It's finals week here at Immanuel.
It is.
And it's a half day, and it's supposed to not be as hectic, yet we had to push this back an hour. There were just things that came up, and so I'm happy that we were able to get this hour in and kind of talk. It's been good.
Yeah, that's related to the, secondary principal starting in January with the title. But the work, that's already
The
started.
work has definitely already started.
Yeah.
But I think if you took a poll of the entire school, we're all ready for break. We're ready.
Oh,
we're
yeah.
ready for.
Oh, yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah. When do we come back? Come back the 6th?
We come back the 8th.
The 8th. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Students come back the 9th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to remind everybody, but you have to come
Right.
back in January.
Yeah. How dare you talk about a return?
I know. I have to go back to college in January. It's not.
Ugh.
Yeah. But we all have our cross to bear. Am I right?
That's right. That's right.
All right. So right before we went to break, we were talking about you coming back to Immanuel. You know, why you took a little bit of a break, went off, did full-time ministry for several years,
Mm-hmm.
and then you had a realization that God had been prepping you for a mission field right here at Immanuel Christian School. You came back in
18.
So that was the 18-19 year.
Yes.
So that was the year after I graduated. It was right after I graduated. You came back. I missed your anatomy and physiology class by that much.
Yep, you did.
It's probably the only reason I passed. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to brag. I got an A in anatomy and physiology.
Hey, congratulations.
And it's probably only because you weren't the teacher.
that I wasn't there.
That's right. You weren't there. However, you decided to rejoin Immanuel. What was kind of that process like after being gone for 3-4 years?
Yeah.
What was that? What was that like?
Yeah, it was a little bit different. You know that old adage, what you don't use, you lose?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
After not teaching for 3
joke.
years.
No joke. Yeah, I'd be standing up there getting ready to teach a concept that previously, man, just, without even thinking, that stuff would just flood into my mind. And I'm like, wait a minute, I better read up on this.
Yeah.
I have no idea what happens next.
Time to
So
get
yeah,
back
there
in.
were a couple times I got caught flat-footed in the classroom over that.
Did you change anything about the way you taught? Like, was there anything noticeable that you were like, I used to do this, but I don't know. And maybe because kids had changed, maybe because you had changed, maybe the way of teaching had changed. Was there anything different that you did?
Yeah, there were a lot of things I did differently, but they were, I think most of them were probably reactionary rather than intentional. There were some things I did intentionally. I definitely wanted to infuse more about God in my lessons. With science, that is such a natural thing to talk about anyway.
Right.
But it's so easy to just make an assumption that because you teach at a Christian school, everybody sitting in that classroom is on the same page with you when it comes to God. And so I do try to be more intentional about that. I think, there were some things when I came back that I remember very distinctly thinking, I'm kind of surprised that we're doing this at our school. A lot of things when I left, looking at those things when I returned, they were not held as tightly. The standards seem to have shifted a little bit. So I was a little bit surprised by that, but those were the reactionary types of things
that you had to adjust to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The the cell phone policy had changed in that 2 years time, and just
I liked that. I'm not going to complain
right?
about that. I
who doesn't like that?
Yeah, that changed after that freshman year. So I was like, hey, this sounds like a
anybody
positive thing
under
to
the
me.
age of 20 like that change. Yeah, even like dress code had changed, and some things that were I would say ingrained in me through those previous years were not there anymore when I came back. And so there was an adjustment not only in the classroom, but there was an adjustment to the new way of doing things at ICS. And so, that was a little bit of a difference there.
I know if we're talking about change, a lot of the faces have changed while you've been here. Okay, so we were actually talking about this during the break. I guess when you look at more of the secondary teachers, pretty much everybody who's upstairs, that's
right.
That's where a lot of the changes have taken place. I was
Yeah,
thinking, I think we have Miss Epperson still here.
Yep,
We have
Epperson's here.
you still here.
And myself, I think, is
As far as teachers and
as
secondary.
far as secondary.
Yeah.
Everybody else is, if you were here prior to, 18, 17, you probably haven't had the teachers that we have now.
No. Yeah.
So there, it's a relatively young team together, in the respective time as a team, not as in young
yeah,
in
not
age.
that everybody's young, but You guys haven't
Right,
spent a
yeah.
whole lot of time together.
Yeah, because we've already established indirectly that I'm old. So, yeah, I can't wear the label young anymore. So,
Hey, well, I mean, if it makes anybody feel better, I've been here for close to.
you're old too.
I've been close to, what is it, almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
19 years.
You count what from
Like
K?
that.
K5?
First grade.
First
If I
grade.
count
All
from
right,
first
there
grade.
you go.
Yeah.
Count your first
And
grade.
I've upgraded from cubbyhole to actually have a whole office here. So would you look
have
at
a
that?
bigger cubby hole.
honestly, it's pretty much just a big cubby hole.
Yeah.
But you were talking about just how maybe the focus had shifted on just kind of what the school's focused on as a whole, but and in the realm of discipline, in the realm of just how things were done.
Yeah.
But part of Immanuel Christian's mission statement is to have students leave here with a biblical worldview.
Right.
That's something that's been included for several years now. That's part of our mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
But what you just mentioned, which was very interesting, was for a while in your teaching career, you would go into teaching kind of with the assumption that kids had a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can speak as a student. I know for a fact we didn't. I don't even think I had much of a one as a student, a biblical worldview per se.
Yeah.
Really didn't get that fully until college. I think Immanuel did a great job of laying the foundation for that, but it wasn't cultivated, I guess, until I got to college. So just touch on that, I guess. When you're changing the way you teach and you're starting to, I guess you already always knew this, but you're starting to recognize the fact that not everybody in here may be a believer. How can I incorporate that into my lesson plans and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's really important to recognize. I think being a teacher at a Christian institution is that you would probably be naive to make the assumption that everybody was a Christian. My assumption was that the majority of the students I taught were already believers. But I don't think that's a correct assumption. I think at our school that number is considerably less than most people would imagine it to be. I think there's a lot of people that come to our school who are religious, and because of their religiousness, they will equate that to a relationship with Christ, when that's not what a relationship with Christ is really all about. Yeah. But as far as, how do you teach a biblical worldview? How do you graduate students who leave with a biblical worldview? And I think you kind of scratched the surface on it when you said when you left, you didn't really have one completely formulated, but you had a pretty decent foundation on which you could build. And I think that's the beauty of a worldview, is that if you get the foundation right, you can build the rest of it without somebody actually standing over you and trying to guide you and
hold your hand
and direct you
process.
And push you down certain pathways. And so I think that is kind of the overarching goal for me. I don't know about my colleagues, but I would assume that they're probably on that same page as well, where that's great if we can get you to develop a pretty well-rounded biblical worldview by the time you graduate. But it's even better if that well-rounded biblical worldview has a really solid foundation to it.
And I think you said it best earlier. You're not here to coddle. You're not here to kind of hold your student's hand through the process. As far as your approach as a teacher, you're here to prepare them for the real world, really. Right. And I think I think you do that in the way you teach. I think you do that in the way that you discipline. The world isn't fair. The world is a cruel and cold place, and that's why you need this foundation. Right. And you don't, explaining to kids that you don't just take what you learned here in Immanuel and that's it. Like, you have to work on it. You have to cultivate it. You have to build off of it. Yeah. And some people get that and some people don't. And the courses of our lives, that sets up the course of our lives, depending on if you got that and if you didn't.
Yeah, and some other factors that help you build a solid biblical foundation is, are you part of a solid Bible teaching community? Do you attend church regularly, where you get to hear the word being rightly and correctly divided? Or is church just kind of like a club? You know, I go when I feel like it, and hey, worship was awesome today. And there's not really any thought about how did what I did corporately in that worship time honor and glorify my Savior? Did it? Or was I just in there for a concert or for some entertainment? And these are the little pieces that we can help define or refine when it comes to establishing a really solid foundation in a biblical worldview and a biblical mindset. So what do you do with what you've been taught at Immanuel Christian School? Do you just cast it to the side and say, well, that was for that time and now I'm going to forge forward? Or do you see the value in what's being done in your life and you say, you know what, they started a really good foundation here, and I'm going to, by the grace of God, I'm going to keep building on that, and I'm going to keep pushing forward and piece my biblical worldview together, because everybody's worldview is a little bit different from everybody else's, and we don't all have the exact same one, but we can all have a very similar sturdy foundation that's anchored on the truth of God and His Word.
Besides the obvious answer just being like God's sovereignty and God's will, what, I might keep this in, I might not, I'm not entirely sure, but I do want to ask you, like, what's the difference? What do you think is the factor between a student that chooses to pursue it, leaving Immanuel, versus just saying, that was my time at Immanuel?
Yeah, wow,
I know it's a deep question. Yeah, it's a loaded question. It's a deep question, but I ask you because part of your ministry at Horizon Christian Fellowship, especially when you took your break here, was really reaching out to youth. Like you would also you would do a lot of community outreaches and community service events and stuff like that. However, I went to a couple of your youth Bible studies at the time also.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is a question I asked Larry McCollum too, and because I know Larry's really involved with youth, actually at the same church that you attend.
Yeah.
So that's why. That's why I'm posing the same question to you too.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, my ministry is with the young adult group, where he's actually with the youth, like, you know, high school, middle school. But to answer your question as best as I think I can from the hip here, I really do think that the defining factor in that, apart from what you've already established as the sovereignty of God and His will, is, do I really recognize, like, if I'm being honest with myself, do I really recognize what it means to be a Christian? What is a Christian? What does a Christian do? How do they live? If you can't really answer that from a biblical foundation, then you're probably not going to hold on to much of what you got from Immanuel, except for the academic part of your education. But if you recognize what God's Word says about what it means to be a follower of Christ, then I think your tendency will be, as you attempt to pursue Him outside of an institution that's always telling you to pursue Him, that you really will keep doing that will be your heart's desire. And even when you hit those patches in life along the way where you just feel like, I don't want to be a Christian anymore, or I don't want to go to church anymore, or I don't want to read my Bible or pray, that there's still going to be that longing from your heart that you need Jesus. You need Him to fill that piece that you're missing in your life, and that he'll still be there, because He's promised us that He's always faithful. He'll never leave us or forsake us, and He's no liar. And so we know, just like we don't stand, I heard Nick Ripken, who's a missionary to multiple foreign lands, he said that in his ministry one day to a certain people group, he said, how do you guys just keep getting up and living out life as Christians, knowing that you're probably going to die today? How do you do that? And the man replied to him, well, when you get up in the morning, do you stand at the window, hands wringing, and hope that the sun's going to come up? You don't. because you know what's going to come up. It's faithful, and that's how we see our God. He is always faithful. He will never not be there for us. And so that gives us hope and comfort and strength as we live out our lives. And I think that's such a solid truth for us to be able to take and to live with in our lives, that we're not faced with persecution like that gentleman was, but we still have things that easily pull us away from who Jesus is and the time that we should devote to him and his word. And we really need to step back and say, why am I doing this? Am I living for me, or am I living for Christ? And then ask God to help you live for him, and he'll be faithful and honor that request.
Yeah, we've had a speaker come to our church now for 2 years in a row, and I can't share his name. We can't even live stream his events. We can't take pictures of him while he's here.
Yeah.
He is a converted Muslim, now to Christianity, been cut off by his entire family. But he does full-time ministry. And he, in order to protect his mission, we can't really ever share anything about him. However, he tells this story, and he's told it every time that he's attended our church. He's somewhere out in Eastern Europe, around the area of Turkey, where there's still a very strong Islamic influence over that part of the world. And he's attending this house church, and there's men being baptized in a bathtub. And we can get into the whole theology of it. Of course, you know, baptism is not necessary for salvation and everything like that.
Right,
but
right.
It is a beautiful display of your salvation and of what God has done in your life. And this particular gentleman who I'm referring to, who's telling the story, was watching the pastor of this one house church baptize these guys. Except, usually when you get baptized, what does the pastor tell you? Have you accepted the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? And in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you're baptized, right? However, this one particular pastor was taking a little bit longer with each one. He was saying more. It was in a foreign language. However, he could tell that he wasn't just asking them the general things.
Right.
And so to your point about what you're referring to about this other missionary that you know, that you heard of, afterwards, this guy asked the pastor, what were you saying to him? And they're saying, well, in our country, he thinks it's important to ask, you realize what you're doing right now as a display, a public display, you can be killed.
Yep.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. And
he said, and what if they don't? What if they say no, or what if they hesitate? He says that we don't baptize them.
Yeah, exactly.
We pull them out and we say, hey, then you got to think about this.
Count the cost, right?
Exactly. And the story moves me every time because we don't face that persecution here.
Right.
Yet for whatever reason, it's so much harder for us to say yes.
Yeah, that's
we're yeah. It just gets me every time because what do we have to complain about? You know?
And I think you see that in lives that are complacent. You have everything you need, and so there's not really anything that you need to be concerned about for the most part. A little hiccup here and there along the path, but when you look at individuals whose lives are more or less riddled with trouble and difficulty, persecution, their faith appears to seem real.
Right.
Where at sometimes your faith, you're like, man, is my faith even real?
Yeah, I've asked myself that plenty of times.
Yeah, in my own life, it's easy for me when things are going really well, all the financial bases are covered. I don't really have any difficulties or problems going on. It's easy for me to not be as intentional with having a conversation with God throughout the day or picking up his word and, gleaning truth from it. But when difficulty steps in, when I'm faced with trials and troubles, I have a tendency to lean into him a lot more. And to my shame, that shouldn't be how my life should be lived as a Christian.
Yeah.
I should be seeking him all the time, in season and out of season. But I think once again, that brings us back full circle to the greatness of our God. He is so faithful. Even when we're not, he never changes. And you could take that to the bank, that no matter what happens in life, that he's going to remain the same. And to me, that's such a great comfort. So I know that when I fail him and when I drop the ball, he's still the same God. And his inerrant characteristics are his own standard. He doesn't change. That's a beautiful thing.
I want to touch on one more thing, and then we're going to get into you as a second-year principal. I'm kind of closing off with that. A little while ago, you also mentioned, kids, students here who graduate, they're having to transition from a place where you have to go to Bible class. You pray often. You have to go to chapel. And as they graduate, they now transition to a place where those things aren't mandatory anymore. Right. They get to make those decisions. And I said it before, what you do with that deciding point, I think, determines the course that your life takes. Whether you choose to continue or whether you choose to neglect that part, it really sets your life on two different courses. Yeah. As a teacher at Immanuel Christian School, and I bring this up because I think this is the biggest complaint I guess I hear from detractors of Immanuel. As a teacher, and you can really only speak for yourself, I guess, how do you strike that balance of I'm not shoving religion down your throat versus I'm trying to be a minister to students so that they don't have a bad taste of Christianity leaving Immanuel, so that they don't have a bad taste of their faith, so that instead of walking away, they choose to cultivate it and they choose to pursue it. Yeah. How do you do that as a teacher?
I live a life in front of them that shows that. I think that's the only thing you can do. When you live out a life of Christianity in the way that it's supposed to be lived out from the biblical perspective, and you're doing it in front of a group of people who probably don't have that model and who don't model it themselves, I think that speaks volumes. And so even though I can in the classroom talk about God and infuse him into the subject matter very easily, if my lifestyle doesn't back up the words that are coming out of my mouth, then I might as well just quit talking about God. Because when that student looks at me, they're looking to see where's Miss Snyder's fault. Where is it that in her own life she doesn't believe what she's talking about when it comes to God? And I think that's very important for any of us as teachers to be able to have a life lived that's an example to them. That, you know what? When those students leave Immanuel Christian School and their mindset is, that was a big waste of my high school career because I got all this religion shoved down my throat, I got some education under my belt, and now I feel like when I go to these secular colleges, I'm in a foreign land. That's what it means to be a Christian. You should feel like you're in a foreign land when you step out into the world. You should be so distinctly different that it feels awkward to you to be there. That's the right feeling for a Christian to have. So is it wrong to have that? No, it's not. But I think in answer to your question, the short answer is, if you don't have somebody living that out in front of you, then why waste your time saying it? It doesn't mean anything. So my heart's desire is that I can live that out in front of my students. I am by no means a perfect individual. I have not arrived. You can ask any student in any of my classes and they will definitely tell you, yeah, Miss Snyder is far from perfect. But what I do try to be is I try to be that individual that lives for God's glory and tries to help others see that that's the best way to live a life, is to give it to him. And then as far as you have the power to do, live out what his word says to do.
I couldn't have said it better myself. We spent the last 45 minutes getting to know Miss Snyder as a person, as a believer, a little bit as a teacher. But just to kind of land the plane here, what can ICS families expect from you as a secondary principal? Just where's your head at going into this new role? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you anxious? All those kind of general things. And just go ahead and share. Just kind of let people get to know you as a secondary principal now a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's definitely exciting, and there's definitely a bundle of nerves, I think, that goes along with that. It's kind of an awkward thing to transition from the classroom into the role of an administrator. So it's a different set of eyes that you have to view things with. So where in the realm of teaching, you're used to going to somebody and saying, hey, do you want this done like this, or do you want it done like that? And now that is completely flipped around, and I catch myself going to my boss and saying, hey, do you want it done like this, or do you want it done like that? And she's like, well, you're the principal.
It's your call now.
Right. You actually get to make that decision now. And so that's kind of a strange aspect of it. So that'll take a little bit of getting used to. But, my heart's desire for our school is to see it continue to be a light shining in a very dark world. And I'll do what I can do from the administrative side to be able to help our teachers and help our students to achieve that end. And so that is the overarching goal. I also think, there's been some things along the way that have kind of been left by the wayside as far as policy is concerned. And I want to try to pick that back up and kind of get it realigned back into kind of how it used to work when we follow policy. And the thing about policy is if you're going to write the policy, then you got to uphold it. Otherwise, why write it? So
I think, and I'm not griping too much, but I think the thing for me was always just like the consistency of it as a student.
Yeah.
You had one teacher apply it one way, you had another teacher apply it the other way. You had the rules, and the rules were the rules. You abided by them, but they were all applied in different ways. And so I think I'm just throwing that out there. I think as a student, that was always my gripe, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing to be able to try to manage. And of course, you've got a lot of individuals in your faculty and staff. You've got your basic foundational policies that you expect them to be able to operate with and by as they're working in their classroom. But at the same time, on the other side of that coin is, there has to be some level of consistency through the whole process. So, we're working on trying to rebuild that consistency. And our teachers, I think they do a bang-up job. We're by no stretch of the imagination where we want to be, but we are definitely moving in the right direction. And I think we have been moving in that direction for the past while now. So that's encouraging. So, yeah.
Just into that last point of discipline, we've implemented the new PBIS system.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? Is that, and I only ask because it's kind of a new thing. You're talking about re-implementing some policies that you may have felt have gone off by the wayside, or at least revisiting them. Something new like PBIS, at least new to Immanuel.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's such a great policy, and it is really new to us because it's a system that works from this positive behavioral reinforcement. So rather than looking for what you're doing wrong, we're looking for what you're doing right.
And how to reward that.
Right. And honestly, there's no way to not see when policy is violated. Otherwise, why have policy if you're not going to uphold it when it's violated? So the PBIS doesn't say that we're going to nix the punishment for breaking the rules or not doing what you're asked to do. But it does mean that there's a flip side to this system where our intention is to try to reward that right behavior so that we can encourage right behavior to continue. So instead of just trying to build a bunch of moralists, do this or that will happen, we want to try to build a culture in our school that says, hey, we want to do what's right rather than just what's expected and maintained. We want to be better than what the expectation
above and
holds.
Beyond, not just the bare minimum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Ms. Snyder, thank you so much for sitting down.
You're
I think our
welcome.
conversation took 5 or 6 different turns, but I'm going to keep all of it in because I think it ended up being a very good conversation. And I have no shame in saying this. I was pulling for you as secondary principal.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm very happy.
Confidence.
I think you're definitely the person for the job. And I've known you as a teacher. I've known you as a coworker. I've known you as a friend. And so I really, really appreciate you stepping up and taking that leadership role.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot. And thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun episode. I'm excited to edit this one. So thank you again to Miss Brandy Snyder for joining us. This has been another episode of the I'm No Expert podcast. Miss Snyder is the new secondary principal of Immanuel Christian School, and it's something that I think everybody needs to be really excited about. I think we have a bright future ahead with new leadership as head of school and secondary principal. And new leadership even in the athletic area. I think Immanuel's really going to grow and really going to thrive. So everybody have a great week. Enjoy it. Merry Christmas. Have a happy new year. And we'll see you guys in 2024. The I'm No Expert podcast is written, edited, and produced by Aaron Peterson. The theme song is performed and written by Franklin Peak. Special thank you to Immanuel Christian School for providing us with necessary equipment and support to make this podcast possible.